My son told me he was traveling for business. But when he left, my granddaughter said, "Dad doesn't travel for business." I froze until she showed me his credit card statement. And then I knew something was terribly wrong. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. I've lived 72 years on this earth, and I thought I knew my son. I thought I understood the quiet man he'd become. Reserved, yes, but honorable. A man who'd built a solid career in logistics management, who'd raised a bright daughter on his own after his wife left them both when Emily was just 6. I thought I knew every shadow that crossed his face, every burden he carried on those shoulders that had grown a little more stooped each year. I was wrong. It started on a Tuesday morning in late September, here in my small house in Meadowbrook, Pennsylvania, a town where everyone knows everyone, where secrets are supposed to be impossible to keep. My son Eric had called 3 days earlier to tell me he'd be traveling to Pittsburgh for a week-long conference. Logistics seminar, he'd said in that clipped way of his. The company's sending several of us. Good for career advancement. I'd believed him. Why wouldn't I? Emily showed up at my door that Tuesday with her backpack still slung over one shoulder, her 17-year-old face tight with something I couldn't immediately name. Not quite anger, not quite fear. Something in between. "Grandma Joan," she said, pushing past me into my kitchen where I'd been preparing my morning tea. "We need to talk." I remember the way the September light filtered through my lace curtains, casting delicate patterns on the worn linoleum floor. I remember thinking how much Emily looked like Eric at that age. The same dark eyes, the same stubborn set to her jaw. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I pulled out a chair for her at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd fed Eric his breakfast for 18 years, where I'd listened to his childhood troubles and teenage confusions. Emily dropped her backpack on the floor and pulled out her phone. Her hands were shaking slightly. "Dad doesn't travel for business," she said flatly. "He lied to both of us." The words hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my voice steady. "Emily, what are you talking about?" She thrust her phone toward me. On the screen was a bank statement, Eric's credit card statement, from the looks of it. I should have asked how she'd gotten it, should have questioned the invasion of privacy, but my eyes were already scanning the charges. "Look at the dates," Emily said, her finger jabbing at the screen. "Every charge from the past 3 days. Not Pittsburgh. Harrisburg. He's been going to Harrisburg, Grandma. For months. Look, there are charges going back 6 months. Same pattern. He tells us he's traveling for work, but he's actually in Harrisburg." My mouth went dry. Harrisburg was only 90 minutes away, but it might as well have been another world. What was Eric doing there? My mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. An affair? Gambling? Some kind of trouble with the law? "There's more," Emily said quietly, scrolling through the statement. "See these charges? Grocery stores, pharmacies, medical supply stores. Grandma, I think Dad might be sick. I think he's been seeing doctors and hiding it from us." The tea kettle began to whistle behind me, a shrill sound that seemed to pierce through the sudden fog in my mind. I turned off the burner with mechanical precision, my hands moving while my brain struggled to process what Emily was telling me. "We need to ask him," I said finally. "When he comes home." "No." Emily's voice was hard. "He'll just lie again. He's been lying for months, Grandma. 6 months of lies. We need to find out the truth ourselves." I looked at my granddaughter, this girl I'd helped raise, who'd spent countless afternoons in this kitchen doing homework while I made her snacks, who'd cried on my shoulder when her mother abandoned them both. She was right, and we both knew it. Eric had always been a private person, but this was different. This was deception on a scale I couldn't comprehend. "What do you want to do?" I asked. Emily's jaw tightened. "I want to follow him. Next time he says he's traveling, we follow him to Harrisburg and see what he's really doing." The idea made my stomach clench. Spying on my own son felt like a betrayal of everything I'd taught him about trust and honesty. But he'd broken that trust first, hadn't he? For 6 months, he'd been living some kind of double life, and neither his daughter nor his mother had known. "All right," I heard myself say. "Next time." We didn't have to wait long. Eric called that evening to tell me he'd be traveling again the following week. "Chicago this time," he said. "4 days. Can you check in on Emily?" "Of course," I replied, my voice somehow normal despite the racing of my heart. "Travel safe, sweetheart." After I hung up, I sat in my living room for a long time, staring at the family photos on the mantel. Eric at his high school graduation, Eric on his wedding day, Eric holding newborn Emily, his face suffused with such joy and terror that it had made me cry when I first saw the photo. Who was my son? What had happened to transform him from the boy I'd raised into someone who could lie so easily, so consistently? The question haunted me through the long evening hours. I tried to tell myself there might be an innocent explanation. Perhaps he really was sick and didn't want to worry us. Perhaps there was some perfectly reasonable explanation for the charges in Harrisburg, for the months of deception. But deep in my gut, I knew it was worse than that. Mother's intuition, perhaps, or just the accumulated wisdom of 7 decades of reading people's faces and hearing the lies beneath their words. The following Tuesday morning, Emily and I watched from my car as Eric loaded his overnight bag into his sedan. He waved to us both, his face showing nothing but the mild preoccupation of a man heading off on a business trip. Then he drove away toward the highway. We followed at a careful distance, Emily navigating with her phone's GPS. I'd driven these Pennsylvania roads for 50 years, but my hand still trembled on the wheel. What we were doing felt wrong, invasive, paranoid. But Emily's set expression kept me focused. She needed answers. So did I. Eric didn't head toward the airport. He took Route 322 east, exactly as the credit card statement had suggested, toward Harrisburg. "I knew it," Emily whispered. We followed him for 90 minutes, hanging back far enough that he wouldn't spot my old Civic in his rearview mirror. The September landscape rolled past, farmland giving way to suburbs, suburbs to city. Eric navigated the Harrisburg streets with the ease of someone who'd made this journey many times before. Finally, he pulled into the parking lot of Harrisburg Medical Center. Emily and I looked at each other. So she'd been right. He was sick. My heart clenched at the thought. My son, my only child, facing some medical crisis alone because... Why? Why hadn't he told us? We parked several rows away and watched as Eric retrieved a folder from his passenger seat and walked into the hospital. He moved like a man carrying an enormous weight, his shoulders hunched, his gait slower than I remembered. "We should go home," I said quietly. "Let him handle this with dignity." "No." Emily's voice was steel. "Something else is going on. I can feel it." She was right. I could feel it too. That electric sense that we'd only scratched the surface of whatever Eric was hiding. But what else could there be beyond illness? We waited in the car for 2 hours. When Eric finally emerged, his face was gray with exhaustion, his eyes red-rimmed. He walked back to his car, but instead of leaving, he sat in the driver's seat for a long time with his head bowed. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. Even from our distance, I could see his lips moving, his free hand gesturing in agitation. The conversation lasted 10 minutes. When it ended, Eric didn't start his car. Instead, he sat perfectly still for another 5 minutes, as if gathering strength for something. Then he drove. Not back toward Meadowbrook. Not to a hotel for his supposed business trip. He drove deeper into Harrisburg, into a neighborhood of small, tired houses with chain-link fences and cars on blocks and driveways. The kind of neighborhood where people worked 3 jobs and still struggled to pay the rent. Eric pulled up in front of a small blue house with peeling paint and a ramp leading to the front door. A disability ramp. Emily grabbed my arm. "What is this? Who lives here?" We watched as my son, my careful, reserved son, pulled 3 full grocery bags from his trunk and carried them up that ramp. He didn't knock. He used a key he pulled from his pocket and let himself inside. The door closed behind him, and Emily and I sat in shocked silence in my car, staring at that small blue house with its sagging porch and overgrown yard. "Grandma," Emily whispered, "what is Dad doing?" I couldn't answer, because I didn't know. But I knew, with a certainty that made my blood run cold, that we'd just uncovered something that would change everything. Some secret so significant that my son had been willing to lie for 6 months straight. And whatever it was, It was hidden behind that blue door. We sat in that car for 45 minutes, watching the blue house as if it might reveal its secrets through sheer force of our staring. Emily kept checking her phone, her leg bouncing with nervous energy. I kept my hands on the steering wheel, gripping it like an anchor to reality. When Eric finally emerged, he wasn't alone. A woman came to the door with him, mid-30s perhaps, with dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail and exhaustion written in every line of her face. She touched Eric's arm as they spoke, and even from our distance, I could see the gratitude in her expression. Eric nodded, said something that made her smile weakly, then walked back to his car. "Follow him?" Emily asked. I shook my head. "No, we need to find out who lives in that house." Eric drove away, and we waited another 10 minutes before approaching. My heart hammered against my ribs as Emily and I walked up that disability ramp. Up close, the house looked even more worn. Paint peeling in long strips, one window cracked and taped, the doorbell hanging loose from its wiring. I knocked. Waited. The woman who answered was the same one we'd seen with Eric. Up close, I could see the purple shadows under her eyes, the weariness that went deeper than simple fatigue. This was a woman carrying burdens too heavy for one person. "Yes?" she asked, wariness creeping into her voice. "I'm sorry to bother you," I said, choosing my words carefully. "My name is Joan. I'm Eric Scott's mother." The transformation was immediate. Her face went pale, then flushed red. "Oh, God! Oh, no! He promised no one would—" She gripped the doorframe. "Please, you can't tell anyone. Please. He's been so good to us, and if his company finds out—" "Wait," I held up my hand. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just need to understand what's happening. Why is my son bringing you groceries? Why does he have a key to your house?" The woman's eyes filled with tears. "You really don't know?" "I don't know anything," I said quietly. "But I need to." She hesitated, looking back into the dim interior of the house. Then she stepped aside. "You should come in. But please, please don't make this worse for him. He's already paying such a terrible price." The inside of the house was clean but sparse. Second-hand furniture, bare walls, a sense of people living with only the absolute essentials. In the corner of the living room sat a wheelchair, child-sized, with a stuffed bear strapped to one armrest. "My name is Maria Reeves," the woman said, gesturing for us to sit on a worn sofa. "Your son, he's been helping us for the past 6 months, since my daughter's accident." "What accident?" Emily asked, her voice tight. Maria's face crumpled. "Katie was hit by a car. Hit and run. She was riding her bike home from school, and someone came around the corner too fast and just hit her, then drove away. Left my baby lying in the street." Horror washed through me. "I'm so sorry. But I don't understand. What does this have to do with Eric?" Maria wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Your son works for Meridian Logistics, right? As a senior manager?" "Yes. His boss is Richard Caldwell, the CEO." Maria's voice went flat, dead. "Richard Caldwell is the man who hit my daughter." The room seemed to tilt. Emily grabbed my hand, her fingers ice cold. "That's impossible," I said. "If you know who hit your daughter, why isn't he in jail?" "Because there's no proof," Maria said bitterly. "The accident happened at 4:47 p.m. on March 15th. Katie remembers a black Mercedes SUV. She remembers the license plate started with XR7. She remembers the man's face through the windshield, middle-aged gray hair, glasses. That's Richard Caldwell's car, his appearance. But when the police investigated, his car had no damage. He had an alibi, said he was in a meeting at the office, and he had witnesses. "Let me guess," Emily said coldly. "One of those witnesses was my father." Maria nodded slowly. "Your father was at that meeting. He backed up Caldwell's story. But about 3 weeks later, Eric showed up here. He told me the truth. Caldwell left the meeting early, was gone for 40 minutes, came back in a panic. Eric heard him on the phone with his personal mechanic, arranging emergency repairs for minor front-end damage from a deer strike. When Eric put it together, he confronted Caldwell. And? I could barely force the word out. Caldwell said if Eric kept quiet, he'd make him VP of operations, double his salary, stock options. the promotion he'd been working toward for 8 years. Maria's voice shook. And if Eric didn't keep quiet, Caldwell would destroy him. He has connections. With the police, with lawyers, with judges. He said he'd make sure Eric never worked in logistics again. Said he'd dig up dirt on Eric's divorce, use it to take custody of Emily. Emily made a small, wounded sound. So Eric took the deal, Maria continued. And then he couldn't live with himself. He started coming here, bringing food, paying our bills, helping with Katie's medical expenses. He's been trying to make up for what he did, but it's eating him alive. I sat in silence, trying to process this. My son, my ethical, principled son, had lied to protect a hit-and-run driver who'd left a child disabled. For money, for career advancement, for safety. And then he'd compounded the lie by trying to fix it with secret charity, as if groceries and paid bills could balance the scales. "Where's Katie now?" I asked quietly. "Physical therapy," Maria said. 3 times a week. She'll never walk normally again. The damage to her spine." She couldn't finish. Emily stood abruptly. "We need to go to the police. My father needs to tell the truth." "No!" Maria jumped up, panic flooding her face. "Please, no! If Eric recants his statement, Caldwell will retaliate. He'll hurt your father, hurt you. And without physical evidence, it'll just be Eric's word against Caldwell's. The police won't reopen the case. All we'll do is make things worse." "So we do nothing." Emily's voice rose. "We let this monster get away with it?" "We're not doing nothing," I said slowly, my mind beginning to work. "But Emily, Maria's right. We can't just charge in. Caldwell has too much power, too many connections. We need to be smart about this." "Grandma, your father is already being smart," I interrupted. "He's creating a record. 6 months of bank statements showing payments to this family. A pattern of behavior that proves he knew something was wrong. That's evidence, Emily. We just need to figure out how to use it." Maria was shaking her head. "Please don't involve us in anything. Katie's been through enough. We can't." The sound of a key in the lock froze us all. The door opened and a man walked in. Late 30s, wearing a mechanic's uniform with Rodriguez embroidered on the pocket. He stopped when he saw us, his eyes going immediately to Maria. "Who are these people?" "Carlos, this is Eric's mother and daughter. Get out." His voice was hard. "We want nothing to do with his family." "Carlos, please." "No, Maria." He moved between us and his wife, his body language pure protection. "This man lies to protect a rich criminal, then throws money at us like that makes it okay? And now his family shows up? No, you need to leave." "Mr. Rodriguez," I said calmly, "I understand your anger, but we're trying to help." "Help?" He laughed bitterly. "You want to help? Tell your son to stop playing hero. Tell him to leave us alone. Tell him we don't want his guilt money." "You were taking it before," Emily shot back. "Because my wife is too kind for her own good. Because we need it for Katie's therapy. But I told Maria, every dollar from that man is poison. It's blood money." He turned to Maria. "I'm calling it off. No more payments. No more visits. We're done. Carlos, we can't afford. We'll manage, like we did before." He looked at me, his eyes cold. "My daughter was left in the street like garbage. Your son could have prevented that. Could have stopped that bastard. But he chose money over my little girl. So no, we don't need his help, and we don't need yours. Get out of my house." We left. There was nothing else to do. As we walked back to my car, I could hear raised voices inside the house. Carlos and Maria arguing in rapid Spanish. Emily was crying silently. I put my arm around her shoulders, but I had no words of comfort. What could I say? That her father had made an impossible choice? That sometimes good people do terrible things under pressure? None of it made this better. We drove back to Meadowbrook in silence. The September sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that seemed obscene given what we'd just learned. When I pulled up to my house, Emily turned to me. "What do we do, Grandma?" "We talk to your father," I said. "We tell him we know, and then we figure out the truth. All of it. What if there's more?" The question hit me like ice water. What if there's more? Maria had said Eric was paying such a terrible price. She'd said Caldwell would hurt Eric if he talked. What else was my son hiding? As if in answer, my phone buzzed. A text from Eric. Home tomorrow. Need to talk to you both. Important. Love you. Emily saw it too. He knows, she whispered. Somehow, he knows we found out. Or, I thought with growing dread, he's ready to tell us something worse. I looked at my quiet house, at the porch light I'd left on, at the familiar shape of the home where I'd raised my son to be honest and brave and good. Where had I gone wrong? Or had I not gone wrong at all? Had I simply failed to prepare him for how cruel the world could be, how easily good people could be corrupted? Tomorrow, I said firmly, we'll hear what he has to say, and then we'll decide what to do. But even as I said it, I knew that whatever Eric revealed tomorrow would shatter what remained of our family's foundation. The Blue House in Harrisburg had been just the beginning. There was something more, something that scared Eric enough to make him reach out first, something that, God help us, was about to explode our lives apart. End of Part 2. Word count, 1,750. Part 3. The Turning Point. Eric arrived at my house the next morning looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow, and when he embraced me, I could feel how much weight he'd lost. The wool cardigan that had fit him perfectly last month now hung loose on his frame. Mom, he said, his voice cracking. Emily, I need to tell you something, before you hear it from anyone else. We sat in my living room, the three of us arranged around the coffee table like we were about to hold a wake. In a way, I supposed we were. The Eric we'd thought we knew was already dead. Now we were just waiting to see what remained. I know about Katie Reeves, I said quietly. Emily and I followed you to Harrisburg. We talked to Maria. Eric's face went white, then red. Then he simply crumpled, his head falling into his hands. Oh God, Mom, I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to find out like this. How did you want us to find out? Emily's voice was ice. At your funeral? After you died keeping Caldwell's dirty secret? Eric's head snapped up. What? You're sick, Emily said. The hospital visits, the credit card charges at pharmacies. You think we're stupid? For a long moment, Eric just stared at her. Then, impossibly, he laughed. A broken, desperate sound. You think I'm sick? That's what you... He stopped, pressing his palms against his eyes. No, Emily, I'm not sick. I wish it were that simple. Then why were you at the hospital? I demanded. I was visiting someone who... He took a shuddering breath. Mom, there's so much more to this than Katie Reeves. So much worse. And I need to tell you now, because in about 6 hours, everything is going to fall apart. The fear in his voice made my blood run cold. What are you talking about? Eric pulled out his phone, scrolled through it, then set it on the coffee table facing us. On the screen was a news article. Federal investigation into Meridian Logistics. Anonymous tip alleges fraud. Tax evasion. The article was dated today, published 2 hours ago. Caldwell's company is going down, Eric said flatly. The FBI got an anonymous tip 3 weeks ago about massive financial fraud. Fake invoices, offshore accounts, tax evasion schemes going back 5 years. They've been investigating quietly, but this morning the story leaked. By this afternoon, agents will be at our offices with warrants. Emily leaned forward. Did you send the tip? No. Eric's laugh was bitter. I wish I had. No, someone else at the company figured it out and reported it. But here's the thing. I've known about the fraud for 8 months, since before Katie's accident. Caldwell brought me in on it when he made me senior manager. Said it was standard practice that everyone at our level was optimizing their tax burden this way. My hands clenched in my lap. You've been helping him commit fraud? I've been documenting it, Eric said. Every fake invoice, every offshore transfer, every falsified report. I kept copies of everything, stored them in a safety deposit box at First National. I was building a case. I was going to... He stopped, his face twisting. I don't know what I was going to do. Turn him in? Use it as leverage to make him confess about Katie? I told myself I was waiting for the right moment, but really I was just a coward, too afraid to act. And now someone else acted first, I said slowly. which means Caldwell knows the FBI is coming. Which means he's desperate, Eric continued. This morning he called me. Said he needs someone to take the fall for the fraud. He's been moving money around, creating a paper trail that leads to me. By tomorrow, I'll look like the architect of the whole scheme. He's got forged emails, doctored documents, testimony from other executives he's paying off. When the FBI shows up, they'll think I masterminded everything. Emily was on her feet. That's insane. You have proof he's behind it. Proof I can't access. Eric's voice broke. I went to the bank this morning. My safety deposit box was opened 2 days ago, not by me. Everything inside is gone. Bank records show my signature, my ID, but it wasn't me. Caldwell must have bribed someone, forged credentials. All my evidence is gone. Then you tell the FBI the truth, I said. You explain what he did. They won't believe me, Mom. Don't you see? Caldwell's been setting this up for months, maybe longer. He knew I was keeping records. He knew I was a liability after Katie's accident. He's been planning to destroy me all along, and I walked right into it. The room fell silent, except for the ticking of my grandfather clock. Eric looked at us with eyes full of despair and resignation. There's more, he said quietly. The person I was visiting at the hospital. Her name is Janet Day. She used to be Caldwell's executive assistant. 3 months ago, she tried to report the fraud to the SEC. A week later, she was in a hit-and-run accident. Just like Katie. Only she was hurt worse. Traumatic brain injury, multiple surgeries. She's been in rehabilitation ever since. Horror washed over me. Caldwell tried to kill her? I can't prove it. But yes, I think so. Eric's hands were shaking. When I heard about Janet's accident, I knew. I knew he was capable of anything. That's when I started visiting her, paying for her medical care beyond what insurance covered. Her family couldn't afford it, and I felt responsible. I'd seen what he did to Katie and said nothing. I couldn't let him destroy another life without at least trying to help. So you've been paying for 2 families, Emily said slowly. Katie's therapy and Janet's medical care. That's why you've been emptying your savings. Eric nodded. I thought if I could just help them, if I could at least do that much, it would mean something. But it doesn't. Nothing I've done matters. Katie's still in a wheelchair. Janet still can't remember half her life. And now Caldwell's going to send me to prison for crimes he committed. No. My voice came out harder than I'd intended. No, he's not. Eric, listen to me. Did Janet ever tell you anything about the fraud? Does she remember anything that could help? She's barely coherent, Mom. The brain injury. Does she have any records? Anything she might have kept? Eric hesitated. I don't know. Maybe? Her husband mentioned she used to keep personal copies of important documents, but I never asked. What would be the point? The point, I said firmly, is that we're not rolling over for Richard Caldwell. Emily, get my purse. Eric, you're going to take me to see Janet Day right now. Mom, she can't help. She can barely... She kept documents, I interrupted. That means she knew Caldwell was dangerous. That means she was protecting herself. We're going to find out what she knew and what she kept. Eric stared at me like I'd grown a second head. You can't. This isn't some small-town problem you can fix, Mom. This is the FBI, federal prison. Caldwell has lawyers and connections and you have the truth, I said. And you have me. Now get up. We're leaving. For a moment, I thought he'd refuse. Then something shifted in his face. A flicker of the boy I'd raised, the one who'd believed his mother could fix anything. He stood. We drove to Harrisburg in Eric's car, Emily in the back seat with her phone out, already researching federal fraud cases and whistleblower protections. I sat beside Eric, watching him grip the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity. Why are you helping me? He asked suddenly. I lied to you for months. I protected a man who hurt a child. I'm a coward and a criminal. You're my son, I said simply. And yes, you made terrible choices, but you made them out of fear, not malice. And now you're going to make better choices. We all are. The rehabilitation center was a low brick building surrounded by manicured lawns. Eric led us through the lobby to the long-term care wing, where a nurse greeted him by name. Mr. Scott, you're early today. Janet's in the common room. Janet Day was a woman in her mid-40s, sitting in a wheelchair by a window overlooking a garden. Half her head was shaved from surgery, the scars still angry and red. When she saw Eric, her face lit up with a lopsided smile. "Eric," she said slowly, her words slightly slurred. "You came. I always come," Eric said gently, kneeling beside her chair. "Janet, this is my mother Joan and my daughter Emily. They need to ask you some questions about Richard Caldwell." The change was immediate. Janet's smile vanished, her eyes going sharp and focused in a way that startled me. For just a moment, I glimpsed the intelligent, competent woman she'd been before the accident. "Caldwell," she said, her voice hardening. "He did this. I know he did." "Janet," I said carefully, sitting across from her. "Eric told me you kept personal copies of documents. Do you still have them? Did you give them to anyone?" Janet's eyes moved between us, calculating. "Why do you want to know?" "Because Caldwell's trying to frame Eric for the fraud you reported. We need proof of what Caldwell really did." "Eric protected him," Janet said, looking at my son. "After Katie. You lied for him." Eric flinched. "I know. I'm sorry. I was wrong." "Yes." Janet's gaze held his. "You were." Then she looked at me. "My husband has everything. I gave it all to him before I tried to report Caldwell. I knew it was dangerous. I knew he might retaliate. So I made copies and told Tommy to hide them." "Insurance." "Where?" Emily asked urgently. "Safe. Our house." Janet's face twisted with effort, trying to form words. "But Tommy won't give them to you. He hates Eric. Blames him for what happened to me." "Why would he blame Eric?" I asked. "Because I told him," Janet said simply. "I told him Eric knew about Katie's accident and said nothing. I told him Eric was Caldwell's accomplice. When I had my accident, Tommy knew Eric could have stopped it if he'd spoken up months earlier. He won't help Eric. Won't even talk to him." Eric stood abruptly, his face stricken. "I should go. I'm sorry, Mom, this was a waste of time." "Sit down," I said sharply. Eric froze. I turned back to Janet. "Mrs. Day, I understand your husband's anger. But Eric isn't the enemy here. Caldwell is. And if we don't stop him, he'll keep hurting people. You know that." Janet studied me for a long moment. Then she reached out and pressed a button on her wheelchair's armrest. A phone appeared on a small screen. "Call Tommy," she said clearly. The phone rang twice before a man answered. "Janet? Is everything okay?" "Tommy, I need you to do something." Janet's words were slow but clear. "Eric Scott is here. His mother and daughter, too. They need the documents. From the safe." "Absolutely not. Janet, we talked about this. Scott is as guilty as—" "No," Janet interrupted. "He's a coward, but not guilty. Not like Caldwell. And if we don't help him, Caldwell wins. Tommy, please. For me." Silence on the other end. Then, "If I do this, I never want to see Scott again. You understand?" "Yes," Janet said, her eyes on Eric. "We understand." After Janet gave us the address and safe combination, we said our goodbyes. As we turned to leave, Janet caught my hand. "Mrs. Scott," she said softly, "your son is weak, but he's not evil. Remember that." In the car, Eric was silent, his face a mask of shame and relief. Emily was already mapping the route to the Day's house on her phone. And I sat thinking about how quickly everything had changed. This morning, we'd known about Katie Reeves. Now we knew about Janet Day, about federal fraud, about Caldwell's willingness to destroy anyone who threatened him. We knew Eric was about to be arrested for crimes he'd witnessed but hadn't committed. And we knew that somewhere in Tommy Day's safe were documents that could change everything. If we could get to them before Caldwell realized what we were doing. If Tommy Day didn't change his mind. If the FBI didn't show up at Eric's office before we could build our case. Too many ifs. Too many ways this could go wrong. But as we pulled out of the rehabilitation center parking lot, heading toward what might be our only chance at salvation, I felt something I hadn't felt since this nightmare began. Hope. Not because I thought this would be easy, but because for the first time, we weren't running scared. We were fighting back. Tommy Day's house was in a modest neighborhood on the outskirts of Harrisburg. Brick ranchers with small yards, cars from the early 2000s. the kind of place where people worked hard and kept to themselves. When we pulled up, a man was already waiting on the front porch, arms crossed, his expression carved from stone. Tommy Day was shorter than I'd expected, maybe 5'6", but he radiated an intensity that made him seem larger. As Eric approached, Tommy's jaw tightened visibly. "Stay there," Tommy said, holding up a hand. "You don't come in my house, ever." Eric stopped on the walkway. "I understand. Tommy, I'm sorry." "Your sorry means nothing." Tommy's voice could have cut glass. "My wife can barely remember our wedding day. She'll never work again. She wakes up screaming from nightmares about a black Mercedes coming at her. And you could have prevented all of it if you'd had the courage to speak up about Katie Reeves." "You're right," Eric said quietly. "I was a coward. I am a coward." "Eric," Emily started to protest, but I touched her arm, stopping her. Eric needed to hear this. We all did. Tommy descended the porch steps, stopping inches from Eric. "Janet thinks you deserve a second chance. My wife, who can barely string together a sentence, who has to relearn how to read, who will never be the woman I married. She thinks you're worth saving." He shook his head. "I think she's wrong. But I love her more than I hate you. So here." He thrust a manila envelope at Eric. Everything Janet copied before she reported Caldwell. Bank records, emails, invoices, offshore account numbers, all of it. "But I want you to understand something, Scott. If you fail, if Caldwell gets away with this, I will spend the rest of my life making sure everyone knows what kind of man you are. Your daughter, your mother, your neighbors, your friends. They'll all know you're the coward who let my wife get destroyed." Eric took the envelope with shaking hands. "Thank you. Don't thank me. Just win. Because that's the only thing that matters now." Tommy looked at me, his eyes hard. "Mrs. Scott, your son is not a good man, but maybe you can make him better than he is. God knows someone needs to." He went back inside and closed the door with finality. We stood on the walkway in silence for a moment. Then Eric opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside were hundreds of pages, spreadsheets, bank statements, email printouts, handwritten notes in Janet's neat script. Emily pulled out her phone and started photographing each page while I held them up. "We need to get this to the FBI before they raid the office," Emily said. "Show them Caldwell is the real criminal." "It's not that simple," Eric said. "These documents prove Caldwell's guilt, but they also prove I knew about it. I'll still be complicit. I could still go to prison. But as a witness, not a mastermind," I said. "That's the difference between 2 years and 20. Eric, you need a lawyer. Right now." Eric's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and his face went gray. "It's Caldwell. He wants to meet." "Don't answer," Emily said immediately. "I have to. If I don't, he'll know something's wrong. He might—" Eric stopped, but we all knew what he wasn't saying. "Caldwell might hurt someone else, might come after us." "What does he want?" I asked. Eric opened the message. "He wants me at his house in an hour. Says he has a solution to our mutual problem." His laugh was bitter. "He probably wants me to sign a confession. Take the fall gracefully in exchange for him not hurting Emily." The words hit me like a physical blow. He threatened Emily? Not explicitly, but yes. Eric's voice was hollow. 2 weeks ago, he mentioned how dangerous the roads around Meadowbrook are. How many accidents happen on Route 322. How a young driver like Emily could so easily lose control on those curves. Emily's face had gone pale. I felt rage building in my chest. Pure, white-hot fury at this man who'd destroyed so many lives and now dared to threaten my granddaughter. "You're not going," I said flatly. "Mom, I have to. If I don't show up, if you show up alone, he'll force you to sign whatever he wants. Or worse." I grabbed Eric's phone. "We're doing this differently. Emily, call information. Get me the number for the FBI field office in Harrisburg." "What are you doing?" Eric asked. "Playing offense instead of defense." I was already dialing. "Hello? Yes, I need to speak to whoever's handling the Meridian Logistics investigation. It's urgent. I have evidence about Richard Caldwell's fraud scheme." "Yes, I'll hold." Eric grabbed my arm. "Mom, you can't." "I can, and I am. Caldwell thinks he's backed us into a corner. He thinks we're scared and stupid. He's right about scared. But we're not stupid. I pulled my arm free. You're going to meet him, but you're wearing a wire, and the FBI is going to hear every word he says. A wire? Emily's eyes widened. Where are we going to get her phone? Eric said slowly, understanding dawning on his face. She can record on her phone, if I keep it in my jacket pocket. Hello? A woman's voice came through my phone. This is Special Agent Martinez. You said you have information about Meridian Logistics? I explained quickly. Eric's involvement, Caldwell's threats, the documents we just obtained, and the meeting scheduled in 40 minutes. Agent Martinez listened without interrupting, then spoke carefully. Mrs. Scott, we've been investigating Meridian for 3 weeks. If your son has direct evidence of Mr. Caldwell's involvement, we want to hear it. But I need to be clear, recording someone without their consent is illegal in Pennsylvania. Anything your son records won't be admissible in court. But you can listen, I said. You can know what Caldwell says, and that will tell you where to look for legal evidence, won't it? A pause. Then, where is this meeting taking place? Caldwell's house. I don't have the address. We have it. Another pause. Mrs. Scott, I can't authorize your son to wear a wire, but if he happens to call someone and leave his phone connected during a conversation with Mr. Caldwell, and if that someone happens to record the call, well, we can't control what private citizens do. Understanding flooded through me. Thank you, Agent Martinez. One more thing. Tell your son to be careful. If Caldwell suspects he's being recorded, things could get dangerous. And Mrs. Scott? We'll be executing our warrant at Meridian's offices at 5 p.m. today. If your son isn't back from this meeting by then, call me immediately. She gave me her direct number, and I hung up. Eric and Emily were staring at me. Grandma? Emily said slowly. You just got the FBI to help us entrap Caldwell. I got them to listen, I corrected. Now we need to make sure Caldwell says something worth hearing. Eric, what does he want from you? Eric thought for a moment. He'll want me to take full responsibility for the fraud. Sign something, probably a prepared confession. He'll threaten Emily if I don't cooperate. He'll promise that if I do this, he'll leave our family alone. Will he keep that promise? No. Eric's voice was certain. Once I'm in prison, he'll have no reason to keep us safe. We're loose ends. He'll find a way to tie us up. The casual way he said it made my blood run cold. Then we need him to confess on tape. We need him to admit what he did to Katie and Janet. We need him to threaten you explicitly. He's too smart for that, Mom. He never says anything directly incriminating. It's all implications and suggestions. Then you make him angry, I said. You push his buttons until he drops the mask. What makes Richard Caldwell lose control? Eric considered this. His ego. He thinks he's smarter than everyone else. If you challenge that, if you make him think you've outsmarted him, then he'll lash out, Emily finished. He'll want to prove he's still in control, which means he'll threaten you explicitly, I said. He'll tell you exactly what he'll do if you don't comply. That's what we need. I looked at Eric. Can you do this? Can you stand in front of the man who's destroyed your life and make him angry enough to confess? Eric was silent for a long moment. Then he straightened his shoulders, and I saw something I hadn't seen in him for months. Determination. Yes, he said. I can do this. We spent the next 20 minutes preparing. Emily set up a recording app on Eric's phone, tested the audio quality, made sure the phone would stay connected if we called it. I rehearsed with Eric what to say, how to provoke Caldwell, when to push and when to pull back. Remember, I told him as he got back in his car. He thinks you're desperate. He thinks you're alone. Let him believe that. Let him think he's won. And then, when he's feeling confident, you tell him you know about Janet's hit and run. You tell him you have proof. But I don't have proof. He doesn't know that. He'll panic. And when people panic, they make mistakes. I squeezed his hand through the car window. You can do this, Eric. I believe in you. He drove away toward Caldwell's house, and Emily and I got in my car. We parked 2 blocks away, close enough to get there quickly if needed, far enough that Caldwell wouldn't see us. Then Emily called Eric's phone, which he answered and muted, tucking it into his jacket pocket. We could hear everything. The sound of his car door closing, his footsteps on pavement, a doorbell ringing. Then Caldwell's voice, smooth as oil. Eric, thank you for coming. We have so much to discuss. The door closed. Emily and I sat in tense silence, listening. For the first few minutes, it was all pleasantries. Caldwell offered Eric a drink, made small talk about the weather, asked after Emily. Eric's responses were careful, measured. Then Caldwell's tone changed. I assume you've heard about the FBI investigation. I heard, Eric said. Unfortunate situation, but I have a solution. I've prepared a document that explains your role in the company's financial irregularities. Sign it, and I'll make sure your family is taken care of. Emily's college fund, your mother's medical expenses as she ages, all handled. You'll do 2, maybe 3 years in minimum security. When you get out, there'll be a job waiting. And if I don't sign, then I'm afraid things become complicated. Caldwell's voice took on an edge. Accidents happen, Eric. You know that better than anyone. Katie Reeves learned that lesson. So did Janet Day. I'd hate for Emily to learn it too. Emily grabbed my hand, her grip crushing. On the recording, Eric's voice was shaking. You're threatening my daughter? I'm explaining reality. You have 2 choices. Protect Emily by taking responsibility, or refuse, and watch me destroy everything you love. I have the resources, the connections, the will. You have nothing. So what's it going to be? This was the moment. I held my breath, praying Eric would remember what to say. I have Janet's documents, Eric said quietly. The ones she copied before her accident. I know about the offshore accounts, the fake invoices, all of it. And I know you tried to kill her, just like you tried to kill Katie. Silence. Then Caldwell laughed, a cold, cruel sound. Eric, Eric, Eric. You're bluffing. Janet's documents were destroyed months ago. I made sure of it. Then how do I know about the Cayman account under the name Meridian Services, LLC? How do I know about the falsified invoices to Weston Manufacturing? How do I know you paid off the insurance adjuster after Janet's accident? Another silence. Longer this time. When Caldwell spoke again, his voice had gone flat, dangerous. Where did you get that information? Does it matter? What matters is that I have it. And if anything happens to me or my family, it goes straight to the FBI. You're making a serious mistake, Eric. No. I made my mistake when I covered for you after Katie's accident. When I watched you destroy Janet and did nothing. I'm done making mistakes. So here's my offer. You turn yourself in, confess to everything, or I give the FBI enough evidence to put you away for 20 years. The sound of movement, a chair scraping. Then Caldwell's voice, low and venomous. You self-righteous little worm. You think you can threaten me? You think those documents mean anything? I own half the judges in this county. I have senators on speed dial. The FBI can investigate all they want. I'll be drinking scotch in my study while they're wasting time on paperwork. Then you have nothing to worry about, Eric said calmly. Katie Reeves was an accident waiting to happen, riding her bike in traffic like that. And Janet, she should have kept her mouth shut, just like you should have. But no, you had to grow a conscience. Caldwell's voice dropped to a whisper. I made you, Scott. I can unmake you. And your daughter? That pretty little girl? I wonder how well she drives. I wonder if she checks her mirrors before changing lanes. Such a shame if something were to happen to her. Emily's eyes filled with tears. I squeezed her hand tighter. Is that a threat? Eric asked. It's a promise. You have 24 hours to bring me those documents and sign my confession. If you don't, I'll make sure Emily has an accident. And this time, it won't be survivable. The recording went silent except for Eric's harsh breathing. Then footsteps, a door opening, and Eric's voice from farther away. I'll think about it. The connection cut off. Emily and I sat in my car, stunned. Then Emily started crying. Great, gasping sobs of fear and rage. I held her, my own heart hammering, my mind racing. Caldwell had just confessed, on tape, to 2 hit-and-runs and a direct threat against Emily's life. It wasn't admissible in court, but Agent Martinez had told me to record the call, which meant the FBI was listening, which meant they knew. My phone rang. Agent Martinez. Mrs. Scott, she said. We heard everything. Can you bring your son and those documents to our office immediately? Yes, I said. We'll be there in 20 minutes. Mrs. Scott, tell your son he did well. It took courage to face Caldwell like that. We're going to make sure he pays for what he's done. As we drove to meet Eric, I felt a fierce pride mixed with terror. My son had stood up to a monster. But monsters don't go down easily. And we had 24 hours before Caldwell made good on his threat. 24 hours to put him away before he could hurt anyone else. The FBI field office in Harrisburg was a nondescript gray building that looked more like an accounting firm than the headquarters of federal law enforcement. Agent Martinez met us in the lobby, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and an expression that gave nothing away. Mr. Scott, Mrs. Scott, Emily. She shook our hands briskly. Follow me. She led us to a conference room where two other agents waited. A younger man introduced as Agent Park, and an older woman, Agent Reeves. The irony of the name wasn't lost on any of us. Let's start with the documents, Agent Martinez said, gesturing to the manila envelope Eric clutched like a lifeline. For the next hour, we went through everything. Janet's meticulously copied records, Eric's account of Caldwell's fraud scheme, the timeline of Katie's accident and Janet's hit and run. The agents listened, took notes, asked pointed questions. Agent Park photographed every document while Agent Reeves cross-referenced them against their existing investigation files. This is good, Agent Martinez said finally. This corroborates everything we've suspected but couldn't prove. The offshore accounts, the shell companies, the falsified invoices. It's all here. Mrs. Day was very thorough. But it's not enough to arrest him, is it? I asked. Not for the hit and runs. Agent Martinez's expression tightened. The financial fraud? We have him cold. With these documents and our investigation, we can charge him with multiple counts of tax evasion, wire fraud, and money laundering. He'll do 15 to 20 years. But the hit and runs? She shook her head. The recording you made is inadmissible. It's fruit of the poison tree, illegally obtained evidence. We can't use it. So he gets away with trying to kill two women? Emily's voice rose. With threatening to kill me? I didn't say that. Agent Martinez leaned forward. What I said is we can't use the recording in court, but we can use it to guide our investigation. Caldwell mentioned paying off an insurance adjuster after Janet's accident. That's conspiracy, and it's something we can prove if we find the right paper trail. He also mentioned having judges and senators on speed dial. That's corruption we can investigate. How long will that take? Eric asked quietly. Weeks, maybe months. We don't have months, I said. We have 24 hours before he makes good on his threat against Emily. Which is why, Agent Martinez said, we're going to accelerate the timeline. We're executing the warrant on Meridian Logistics in 2 hours, at 3 p.m. instead of 5 p.m. We'll seize all company records, computers, everything. Caldwell won't be expecting us until later. The element of surprise might shake something loose. And in the meantime? Emily asked. What happens to us? You stay visible and safe. Caldwell is smart enough to know that if anything happens to any of you now, he's the obvious suspect. The recording proves he threatened you. Even if we can't use it in court, we know his intentions. He won't move against you while our investigation is active. Unless he panics, Eric said. You don't know him like I do. When Caldwell feels cornered, he gets reckless. That's when he's most dangerous. Agent Martinez studied Eric for a long moment. Mr. Scott, I need to be frank with you. Your cooperation today has been valuable, but you're not walking away from this clean. You knowingly participated in financial fraud for 8 months. You falsified documents, signed off on illegal transactions, and lied to investigators. The U.S. attorney will want to charge you. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Emily grabbed Eric's hand. However, Agent Martinez continued, you're also a valuable witness. If you testify against Caldwell, if you help us build an airtight case, the U.S. attorney might offer a plea deal. Reduced charges, minimal prison time, maybe even probation if we're lucky. How minimal? Eric's voice was barely a whisper. 2 to 3 years, most likely. Could be as little as 18 months with good behavior. Emily made a small, wounded sound. Eric squeezed her hand, his face a mask of acceptance. I'll testify. Whatever you need. Good. Agent Martinez stood. We'll be in touch. In the meantime, I need you all to go home and act normal. Don't contact Caldwell. Don't tell anyone about this meeting. And for God's sake, don't try to investigate anything on your own. Let us do our jobs. We left the FBI office as the afternoon sun slanted through the city streets. The drive back to Meadowbrook felt surreal, like we'd stepped out of one world and couldn't quite find our way back into the other. Eric dropped Emily and me at my house, then headed to his own place to wait for news. Emily sat at my kitchen table, her face pale and drawn. He's going to prison, isn't he? Dad's really going to prison. Maybe, I said quietly. Or maybe the U.S. attorney will be more lenient than Agent Martinez thinks. But yes, sweetheart, your father will face consequences for what he did. That's the price of the choices he made. He was trying to protect us, Emily said fiercely. Caldwell threatened to take me away, to ruin Dad's career. What was he supposed to do? Tell the truth earlier, I said gently. Stand up when Katie got hit instead of waiting 6 months. I know it's hard, Emily. I know you want to defend him. But part of loving someone is holding them accountable when they fail. Your father failed. He knows it. And now he has to make it right. Emily's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and her face went white. Grandma, it's a text from an unknown number. She showed me the message. Tell your father he made a mistake. 24 hours. The clock is ticking. My blood ran cold. I grabbed my phone and called Agent Martinez. He's already making contact, I said when she answered. Threatening text to Emily from an unknown number. Forward it to me immediately. We'll trace it. A pause. Mrs. Scott, I want you and Emily to stay together tonight. Lock your doors, keep your phones charged. If you see anything suspicious, any cars you don't recognize, anyone hanging around, call 911 first, then call me. After I hung up, Emily and I sat in my kitchen as the afternoon light faded to evening. I made tea neither of us drank. Emily tried to do homework but gave up after 10 minutes. We were both waiting. For what? We didn't know. News from the FBI, another threat from Caldwell. Something to break the terrible tension. At 6 p.m., my phone rang. Eric. The FBI raided Meridian, he said without preamble. It's all over the local news. They arrested 3 executives, seized dozens of boxes of documents. Mom, Caldwell wasn't there. He's gone. Ice flooded my veins. What do you mean, gone? He didn't come to the office today. His secretary says he called in sick this morning. The FBI went to his house. He's not there either. His car is gone. They think he ran. I thought of the text message, of Caldwell's promise to make Emily have an accident. If he was on the run, desperate and angry, what would he do? Eric, get over here. Now, we need to stay together. I'm already in my car. Mom, the FBI says they've put out a bolo. Be on the lookout for Caldwell's Mercedes. But he could be anywhere. He could... His voice broke. I should have acted sooner. I should have stopped him months ago. Now he's out there, and Emily's in danger, and it's all my fault. It's his fault, I said firmly. Richard Caldwell made the choice to hurt people, to threaten a child. That's on him, not you. Just get here. We'll figure this out. But as I hung up, I wondered if we would. Caldwell had evaded the FBI, which meant he was either running for good or preparing to strike one last time. A man with nothing to lose and everything to avenge. The waiting was agony. Emily and I checked the locks on every door and window. I found my late husband's old baseball bat in the garage and kept it near the front door. Emily sat on the couch with her phone, jumping at every small sound. When Eric finally arrived 20 minutes later, we all breathed a little easier. Safety in numbers, or at least the illusion of it. Agent Martinez called, Eric said, pacing my living room. They've been going through the seized documents. They found evidence of payments to a private investigator, someone Caldwell hired to handle problems. They think this investigator might have been involved in Janet's hit and run, maybe even Katie's. Can they prove it? I asked. They're working on it. But here's the thing. They found recent payments to this investigator, as recent as yesterday, which means Caldwell might have hired him to... Eric looked at Emily, unable to finish the sentence. To hurt me, Emily said flatly. You can say it, Dad. He hired someone to kill me. We don't know that, Eric said quickly. It could be anything. Could be Caldwell preparing to run, hiring security, anything. But we all knew better. Caldwell had 24 hours to make good on his threat, and he'd already proven he was willing to hurt people to protect himself. My doorbell rang. We all froze. It was 7 p.m., full dark outside, and I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the front window, I could see a figure on my porch, backlit by the streetlight. Eric grabbed the baseball bat. Don't answer it. But something made me look closer at the figure. Something about the size, the posture. Wait, I said. I think I know who that is. I opened the door to find Maria Reeves standing on my porch, her face streaked with tears, her hands shaking. Mrs. Scott, she said, her voice breaking. I need your help. Carlos is missing. He went out this morning and never came home. His phone goes straight to voicemail. I'm so scared. What if Caldwell? What if he found out Carlos knows about Katie's accident? What if he... She collapsed against the doorframe, sobbing. I caught her, guided her inside. Eric's face had gone gray. When did you last hear from him? Eric asked urgently. This morning, around 10. He said he was going to work. He's a mechanic at Patterson's Auto. But when I called the shop at lunch, they said he never showed up. Mrs. Scott, Carlos knows things. He knows I talked to you yesterday. He knows about the documents from Janet Day. What if Caldwell is tying up loose ends? What if Carlos is... Don't think that way, I said firmly, though my own mind was racing with horrible possibilities. We'll find him. Eric, call Agent Martinez. Now. As Eric made the call, Emily brought Maria a glass of water and sat with her on the couch. I stood at my living room window, staring out at the quiet suburban street. Somewhere out there, Richard Caldwell was planning his next move, and Carlos Rodriguez, an innocent man whose only crime was loving his disabled daughter, was missing. The pattern was becoming clear. Caldwell wasn't just running, he was eliminating anyone who could testify against him. Janet was still in the hospital, too damaged to be a reliable witness. But Maria knew about Katie's accident. Carlos knew. Tommy Day knew. Eric knew. We all knew. We were all loose ends. My phone rang again. Unknown number. With shaking hands, I answered. Mrs. Scott. Caldwell's voice was smooth, calm, almost pleasant. I assume your son told you about my unfortunate absence from the office today. Such a shame to miss all the excitement. Where's Carlos Rodriguez? I demanded. The mechanic? Safe. For now. In fact, everyone you care about is safe. For now. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell your FBI friends that you made a mistake, that the documents from Janet Day were forgeries, that Eric fabricated everything because he's trying to avoid charges. You're going to recant, Mrs. Scott. All of you. Why would we do that? Because if you don't, people start having accidents. Carlos Rodriguez first, then Maria, then little Katie. Such a shame if her wheelchair were to malfunction, isn't it? And Emily, of course. Sweet, innocent Emily. His voice hardened. I have people watching all of them. One phone call from me and they start dying. So here's the deal. You have until midnight to contact Agent Martinez and recant. After that, I start making calls. You're insane, I said. The FBI will find you. You can't... The FBI will find exactly what I want them to find. I've been planning for this possibility for months, Mrs. Scott. I have resources, safe houses, false identities. By the time they track me down, you'll all be dead. Unless you do exactly as I say. The line went dead. I stood frozen, the phone clutched in my hand. Eric and Emily were staring at me, questions in their eyes. Maria had gone pale. He has Carlos, I said slowly, and he's threatening to kill all of us unless we recant our statements to the FBI. The room erupted, Eric cursing, Emily crying, Maria begging us to save her husband. Through the chaos, my mind worked furiously. Caldwell thought he'd backed us into a corner. He thought we'd fold, recant, let him win rather than risk lives. He thought we were weak. He was wrong. I picked up my phone and called Agent Martinez. I need to meet with you and the U.S. Attorney. Tonight. Right now. Because I know how to catch Richard Caldwell. Mrs. Scott, what are you? He just called me. Threatened to kill multiple people unless we recant our statements. He has Carlos Rodriguez, Maria's husband, held somewhere. And he's arrogant enough to believe we'll do what he says. I took a deep breath. Agent Martinez, I'm 72 years old. I've lived through wars and recessions and personal tragedies. I've raised a son, helped raise a granddaughter, and buried the love of my life. And I will be damned if I let some corporate criminal think he can threaten my family and walk away. Silence on the other end. Then, what did you have in mind? A trap, I said. We give him exactly what he wants. And when he comes to collect, you arrest him. That's dangerous, Mrs. Scott. If something goes wrong, something already went wrong. The moment my son lied about Katie's accident. The moment Caldwell thought he could hurt people and face no consequences. But it ends tonight. Are you in or not? Another pause. Then, I'll call the U.S. attorney. Be at the field office in 1 hour. And Mrs. Scott? This better work. I hung up and looked at my family. My terrified, desperate family. We're not running, I said. We're fighting. And we're going to win. End of Part 5. Word count, 1,050. Part 6. The resolution. The FBI conference room at 9 p.m. held more people than it had that afternoon. Agent Martinez, Agent Park, the U.S. attorney, a severe woman named Patricia Hoffman, and 2 tactical specialists who'd been called in for the operation. Eric, Emily, Maria, and I sat on one side of the table facing them. Let me make sure I understand, U.S. Attorney Hoffman said, her voice crisp. Mrs. Scott, you want to call Caldwell back. Tell him you'll recant your statements and arrange a meeting. When he shows up, we arrest him. Yes, I said. But it has to be convincing. He needs to believe we're desperate and broken. That we'll do anything to save Carlos and protect our families. And you think he'll show up personally? I know he will, I said. Caldwell is a control freak. He won't trust anyone else to handle this. He'll want to see us grovel. He'll want to watch us sign the recantation papers he's prepared. His ego won't let him send someone else. Agent Martinez leaned forward. Where do you want to do this? My house, I said immediately. He'll feel safe there. It's neutral ground. A 72-year-old woman's home in a quiet neighborhood. He won't expect a trap. It's too dangerous, Eric protested. Mom, if something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong, I said firmly. Because the FBI will be there, in the house, outside, everywhere. Isn't that right, Agent Martinez? We can wire the house, Agent Martinez said slowly. Put agents in the basement, in the garage, in unmarked vehicles outside. The moment Caldwell incriminates himself, we move in. What about Carlos Rodriguez? Maria's voice was small, terrified. If we do this and Caldwell realizes it's a trap, he'll have his people kill Carlos. U.S. Attorney Hoffman pulled out her phone and made a call. Wilson, this is Hoffman. I need a tactical team to locate and extract a possible hostage. Carlos Rodriguez, last seen this morning in Meadowbrook. Vehicle registered to... She looked at Maria, who provided the information through tears. The call lasted 5 minutes. When Hoffman hung up, her expression was grim but not hopeless. We have Rodriguez's phone pinging off a cell tower near an industrial area outside Harrisburg. They're mobilizing now to find him. If he's there, we'll have him out before midnight. And if he's not, Maria whispered. Then we use Caldwell's arrest to leverage his location, Hoffman said. But Mrs. Scott is right about one thing. Caldwell's ego is his weakness. He'll want to be present for your surrender. And when he shows up, we'll have him. The plan came together quickly. I would call Caldwell, tell him we'd recant, and arrange for him to come to my house at 11 p.m., 1 hour before his deadline. That would give the FBI time to position agents and wire the house for audio and video. When Caldwell arrived and made incriminating statements, they'd arrest him. Simple. Almost too simple. At 9:45 p.m., we returned to my house to find it transformed. FBI technicians had placed cameras in my living room, kitchen, and hallway. Microphones hidden in picture frames and lamp bases. Agents dressed as utility workers positioned themselves in neighbors' yards. 2 agents would hide in my basement, ready to rush up the moment the signal was given. Agent Martinez fitted me with a tiny earpiece. I'll be listening to everything. If you feel threatened at any point, say the word medication. That's the panic word. We come in immediately. I won't need it, I said. Say it anyway, for my peace of mind. Medication, I repeated dutifully. At 10 p.m., I called Caldwell. My hands were steady, but I made my voice shake. Mr. Caldwell, this is Joan Scott. Mrs. Scott, he sounded pleased. Have you reconsidered my offer? We'll do it. We'll recant everything. Just please let Carlos go. Don't hurt anyone else. A wise decision. I'll send someone to collect the signed statements. No, I interrupted. You need to come yourself. We need assurances. We need to see Carlos released before we sign anything. And we need your word that our families will be safe. Silence. I held my breath, knowing this was the critical moment. Would his ego overrule his caution? Very well, Caldwell said finally. I'll come to your house at 11. Have everyone there. Your son, your granddaughter, Mrs. Reeves, and have the recantation statements ready to sign. But Mrs. Scott, if this is some kind of trick, if the FBI is involved, Carlos Rodriguez dies. Do you understand? I understand, I whispered. Please, just don't hurt anyone. That depends entirely on you. He hung up. I looked at Agent Martinez, who gave me a thumbs up from the kitchen doorway. The trap was set. The next hour crawled by. Eric paced endlessly. Emily sat rigid on the couch, her hands clenched in her lap. Maria prayed quietly in Spanish. I made tea I didn't drink, and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. At 10:47 p.m., Agent Martinez's voice came through my earpiece. Black Mercedes SUV approaching your street, 2 blocks away. Everyone in position. My heart hammered. I sat in my armchair, arranged to look small and defeated. Eric and Emily sat on the couch. Maria stood by the window, supposedly watching for Caldwell, but actually giving the cameras a clear view of her face. Headlights swept across my front windows. A car door closed. Footsteps on my walkway. The doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Richard Caldwell standing on my porch, looking exactly as I'd imagined. Mid-60s, silver hair, expensive suit, cold eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Mrs. Scott, may I come in? I stepped aside. He entered my house like he owned it, his gaze sweeping the living room, taking in Eric, Emily, and Maria with barely concealed contempt. Where are the statements? He asked. Eric held up several pages of paper, recantation forms Agent Martinez had prepared, designed to look legitimate. Here, but we want to see Carlos first. We want proof he's alive. Caldwell pulled out his phone, pressed a button, and turned the screen toward us. A video showed Carlos tied to a chair in what looked like a warehouse, alive but clearly terrified. Maria made a small, broken sound. Satisfied? Caldwell asked. Now sign. Not yet, I said, my voice stronger than I'd intended. First, I need to understand something. Katie Reeves, was hitting her really an accident? Or did you mean to do it? Caldwell's smile didn't waver. Does it matter? It matters to me. He shrugged. The girl came out of nowhere. I was on my phone. Important call. She shouldn't have been riding her bike in the street. Poor timing, really. But when I realized what I'd done, I also realized I had a choice. Ruin my life over one mistake or protect myself. I chose protection. I always do. And Janet Day? Eric asked quietly. Was running her down also protection? Janet was a problem, Caldwell said flatly. She knew too much and wouldn't stay quiet. I gave her chances. I offered her money, promotions, anything she wanted. But she insisted on doing the right thing. He made air quotes around the phrase, mocking it. So yes, I had her removed. Permanently, I hoped. But she survived. A pity. Emily was crying silently. Maria had her hand over her mouth, horror written across her face. And I felt Agent Martinez's presence through my earpiece, heard her quiet voice. We've got him. Keep going. And now you're going to kill Carlos, I said. Even if we sign these statements, you'll kill him anyway. Because he knows too much. Caldwell tilted his head. Probably. Along with Mrs. Reeves eventually. and possibly young Emily here, just to ensure your son's continued silence. Loose ends, Mrs. Scott. I don't leave loose ends. Like you didn't leave loose ends with Katie and Janet, I asked. Precisely. He gestured to the papers in Eric's hands. Now, are we going to do this, or do I need to make a phone call? Actually, I said, standing up straighter, I have a question for you, Mr. Caldwell. Do you know what it means to underestimate someone? His eyes narrowed. What? You underestimated Katie Reeves. You thought a little girl on a bike wouldn't matter. You underestimated Janet Day. You thought a woman could be silenced with threats and violence. And you underestimated me. I pulled the earpiece from my ear and held it up. You thought I was just a scared old woman who'd do anything to protect her family. You were half right. I would do anything to protect them. But I'm not scared. And I'm not stupid. Caldwell's face went white, then red. His hand moved toward his jacket pocket, but the basement door burst open and 2 FBI agents charged up, weapons drawn. FBI! Hands where we can see them! More agents poured through the front door, the back door, surrounding Caldwell in seconds. He stood frozen, his hand still halfway to his pocket, shock and rage warring on his face. Richard Caldwell, Agent Martinez said, stepping forward with handcuffs. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, assault with a deadly weapon, fraud, tax evasion, and about 15 other charges I'm going to enjoy listing. As they cuffed him, Caldwell's eyes found mine. You can't prove any of it. That recording is inadmissible. The recording we made earlier is inadmissible, I agreed. But the video and audio from tonight? When you confessed to hitting Katie Reeves, to ordering Janet Day's hit and run, to planning to murder Carlos Rodriguez and possibly my granddaughter, that's all perfectly legal. This is my house, Mr. Caldwell. I can record whatever I want in my own home. And you just confessed to everything. The rage in his face transformed into something like fear. Good. Agent Park got a call and spoke urgently into his phone. Then he turned to Maria. Mrs. Reeves, we found your husband. He's safe. Tactical team is bringing him in now. He's shaken up, but unharmed. Maria collapsed into a chair, sobbing with relief. Emily threw her arms around me, and Eric stood watching as agents led Caldwell out of my house in handcuffs. U.S. Attorney Hoffman approached Eric. Mr. Scott, we still need to discuss your role in the fraud. But given your cooperation tonight and your testimony, I'm prepared to recommend probation instead of prison time. Community service, restitution, and you'll never work in corporate finance again. But you'll be free. Eric's knees seemed to give out. He sat heavily on my couch. Thank you, he whispered. 3 months later, I sat in my kitchen on a bright December morning reading the newspaper. The trial was set to begin in 2 weeks. Caldwell faced 47 counts ranging from fraud to attempted murder. His lawyers were trying to negotiate a plea, but Hoffman wasn't budging. He'd spend the rest of his life in prison. Eric's case had been resolved with a plea agreement. 3 years probation, 2,000 hours of community service, and a felony conviction that meant he'd never work in logistics again. He'd taken a job at a nonprofit helping small businesses navigate legal regulations. The pay was a fraction of what he'd made at Meridian. But when I saw him now, he looked lighter somehow, like he'd put down a weight he'd been carrying for years. Emily had been accepted to Penn State with a full scholarship. She wanted to study criminal justice. To help people like Katie and Janet, she'd told me. To make sure people like Caldwell don't get away with it. The settlement from Meridian's bankruptcy had provided funds for Katie's ongoing therapy. Maria had called last week to tell me Katie had taken 3 steps with her walker. 3 steps toward a future that looked brighter than anyone had dared hope. My doorbell rang. When I answered, I found Tommy Day standing there with Janet. She was out of the wheelchair, walking with a cane, her face still showing the effects of her injuries, but her eyes clear and focused. Mrs. Scott, Janet said carefully, her words still slightly slurred but understandable. I wanted to thank you. For everything. You don't need to thank me, I said. You were the brave one. You tried to stop Caldwell when no one else would. And you finished it, Tommy said quietly. You did what needed to be done. I'm sorry I was so hard on your son. He's a good man who made bad choices. But he's trying to make it right. Yes, I said. He is. We talked for a while longer, Janet telling me about her rehabilitation progress, Tommy mentioning they were moving closer to family in Pittsburgh. When they left, I stood on my porch watching them walk down the path, Janet moving slowly but steadily, Tommy's hand gentle on her elbow. That evening, Eric and Emily came for dinner. We sat around my kitchen table, the same table where this had all begun 3 months ago when Emily showed me that credit card statement. So much had changed. So much pain had been uncovered, faced, and slowly healed. "Grandma," Emily said as we cleared the dishes, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. How did you know it would work? The trap, I mean. How did you know Caldwell would confess?" I dried a plate slowly, considering. "Because I know what 72 years on this earth teaches you, sweetheart. It teaches you that people like Caldwell, people who think they're smarter than everyone else, who think power makes them untouchable, they always make the same mistake. They underestimate the people they've hurt. They think age makes you weak or fear makes you helpless. But they're wrong." "You weren't afraid at all?" Emily asked. "Oh, I was terrified," I admitted. "But fear doesn't mean paralysis. It means you understand the stakes. And when the stakes are your family, your community, justice for a little girl in a wheelchair and a woman who nearly died trying to do the right thing, well, fear becomes fuel." Eric hugged me then, fierce and tight. "I'm sorry, Mom. For all of it. For lying. For the danger I put you in. For being human," I interrupted gently. "We all make mistakes, Eric. What matters is what we do after. You made terrible choices out of fear. But when it mattered most, you stood up. You testified. You're making amends. That's what counts." Later, after they'd gone home and I was alone in my quiet house, I stood at the window looking out at the December night. Snow was beginning to fall, soft and silent, covering the familiar streets of Meadowbrook in white. I thought about Katie Reeves taking 3 steps, about Janet Day relearning to walk, about Carlos Rodriguez back with his family, safe, about Emily heading to college with fire in her eyes and justice in her heart, about Eric finding peace in honest work, making amends one day at a time. And I thought about Richard Caldwell in a prison cell, his money and power and connections stripped away, facing the consequences of his choices. People sometimes ask me if I'm proud of what I did. The truth is more complicated than pride. I did what needed to be done. I used the weapons I had: patience, observation, the understanding that comes from 7 decades of watching people, the strength that comes from having survived loss and grief and hardship. Youth has its advantages: speed, physical strength, fearlessness. But age has weapons youth can't imagine. We've seen the patterns repeat. We've learned when to push and when to wait. We know that the truth, given time and persistence, always finds the light. Caldwell thought he could intimidate an old woman. He thought age made me weak. He learned too late that age made me wise. And wisdom, in the end, is the most powerful weapon of all. I made myself a cup of tea and sat in my favorite chair, the one where I'd sat 72 years of evenings, where I'd rocked Eric as a baby, where I'd comforted Emily through her mother's abandonment, where I'd faced down a monster and won. My house was quiet, my family was safe, and somewhere, a little girl was learning to walk again. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.